Thanks for taking some time out around lunchtime to spend it with us. Hopefully you'll get a little something out of this. Alex did an excellent job putting this whole program together, and a lot of good information here. I'm Larry from Electrify My Home. If you've been on some of our calls before, same guy, same deal. Been in the HVAC trade for about 42 years. Started installing nothing but heat pumps back in 2015 before I started this business, working for another employer. And we were doing high performance heat pump systems over there. And I decided to start this business, Electrify My Home, in 2020 so that I could answer some questions for people and be a resource and, really talk to people that wanted heat pumps. So that part's worked out pretty good. Our mission statement is to provide the most efficient, cost-effective solutions to California homeowners. And what that means when we talk about most efficient, it doesn't mean it's the one with the highest SEER number. It means it's the one that's going to perform the best because we build systems that perform well. And practice good stewardship of the electrical panel. And mentioning that, our next training coming up is going to be revolving around that quite a bit. And then train and influence other contractors and other interested people to do the same. So moving on. So thank you, Javier, for the introductions and safety messages. One thing I wanted to add to your safety about driving around is get those new wiper blades. It's going to rain again here someday, and they're all on sale really cheap right now at Costco. So I was able to redo all my wiper blades over the weekend. Kind of a little feeling of completion when that happens. So the overview of the Electrify My Home, Electrify Efficiently webinar series, a little background. We're going to talk about most common planning failures and then some simple staging examples or some sample staging examples. And let's get into that. So staging home electrification projects is this week. Next week is that being a good steward of the electrical panel, electrical panel assessments, examples for heat pumps installers. This is going to be a great one. We'll actually go into a little bit of watt diet and other solutions that you can use to replace those high amperage and high wattage appliances with something more palatable for electrification. Actually, we're going to talk about that a little bit in today's presentation too. The great one here in 12.8, operating a heat pump, best practices to minimize callbacks. A lot of this is about preparation. And then heat pump zoning on 12.15. This is going to be a real good one. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of different ways to break that heat pump up in a way that you can manage multiple zones in the house and keep everybody super comfortable. Show you kind of some of our philosophy on how all that works. So hope you join us for those.
Larry, real quick, can we
can
we try to stop the screen share and reshare again? It looks like it's stuck on the Electrify My Home Pioneers slide.
Uh-oh.
So let's see. I just saw it advance to areas of focus. Did you just do that?
Did it come up?
Yeah, it might be a little laggy, but let's try unsharing real quick and sharing right again so we can get back on track.
Okay. You see it moving now?
No, it's still stuck on areas of focus.
Oh, okay, let's see what we can do to fix this problem. How's that?
Okay, we're on Electrify Efficiently Overview. Is that where we should be?
Yep. Are we seeing slides change?
All yes. Good. Yeah, I think we're back on track.
All right. Look, we work as a team here in Electrify My Home. So Electrify Efficiently, our areas of focus are building electrification. We are mostly single family residential retrofit here at this company. Once in a while, about once a year, we'll do a construction project, not necessarily our forte, but really taking a lot of really old houses and making them super modern and all electrified. It's really kind of a fun thing that we do. We do a lot of HVAC and water heating systems of various types and sizes and applications based on what's necessary for that particular customer. Overcoming home electrification barriers. We like approaches that optimize for comfort, efficiency, resilience, and super low operation cost. That's one of our big design factors in everything that we do. And with these trainings, all audiences will benefit. But if you guys are contractors out there and industry professionals, and then sometimes we just have people watching that are super interested in heat pumps, which I understand you guys out there. So just so that you know, my friends are tired of hearing about heat pumps. So a little bit of background. The point of today's webinar is, which way will you choose, the wrong way or the right way? There may be more than two ways. There's a couple different ways to do things right, but there's a lot of ways to do things wrong. And so what we want to help people understand is when we electrify the homes that we do, it's important for us to plot out an entire plan. And so some of you guys might recognize this. This is all about gathering the information necessary to avoid going the wrong way and stay on that right path. So anybody that's read the wonderful Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, this is also 7 Habits of Highly Effective Heat Pump Choosing. So really, really important. Don't wait for your system to die, right? So be proactive about this. Start making plans. Talk to the people you know about electrification. Let them know you need to have a plan for this. You can't wait till your furnace dies and hope you're going to get a good solution while you're freezing in the house waiting weeks to get a job done. This is something that really should be done on more of a project basis and as a upgrade to the house, almost like a construction project or a bathroom remodel or something that you're going to plan for and take care of. The second thing that you really want to do is to define your goal or begin with the end in mind. Figure out what your journey goal is. Not everybody wants to fully electrify. We have a customer right now that has a big old gas fire pit in his backyard, and so he's holding on to his gas with his last breath because of that. And I'm telling him, you know, hey, get yourself a nice big propane tank installed for that thing and take the dive, get out there. So number 3, make sure you put the first things first. Address your most important needs first. Sometimes those are not going to be the need that you know. So a lot of times we go into a transaction with a customer and then we do the site survey, we look at everything, and then we find a water heater that is just dangerous and they wanted to get the heat pump system installed first. And we really say, you know what, we need to take care of this water heater as part of this project. Do we have to replan the project? Can we add that additional amount to the project? Or should we do the water heater first because it's going to present a safety problem? And when we install our heat pumps, we're often doing some pretty complete home improvements as far as weatherization, air sealing, and insulation. And if we do that in a house that already has problems with the water heater, it can really exacerbate that problem. So we want to make sure that we put first things first. Think win-win. Find a partner for your electrification journey that is driven to earn your repeat business. So if you're going to do one thing with one company, I would highly recommend, like if you're planning on a heat pump water heater and a heat pump and running that electrical to the stove and doing the dryer and looking at maybe shared circuits, get one contractor that you're comfortable with if you can find one that will do it all, because you're just going to have fewer numbers to call if something goes wrong, right? It's just better if one person is taking care of everything, because we don't have to worry about all that communication between the contractors and all that. So if you can find one company to do everything for you, that's the way to go. When you're talking to these guys and they come out to your house to give you these estimates for these wonderful electrification improvements on your home, make sure you ask questions beyond your current spec. So if you're talking to the HVAC guy, let them know, hey, I'm going to get a water heater and I want to electrify my stove and I want to do something about my dryer, whatever that is. Make sure that the conversation is going so everybody's expectations are the same And that person's not going to come back and say, well, you never told me you were going to do all this, although they should know by now. But just that's a piece of advice that can't run strong enough. Synergize. Number 6, synergize. Embrace a cooperative relationship with your contractor. Make sure that if they are going to work with multiple police, that they are willing to chat with the electrician, that they're willing to chat with the plumber, if that's who you're going to do. Make sure everybody's in contact and communication. And if you get kind of the feeling that people don't want to interact that way, just maybe think twice, maybe that's not your right guy. And then sharpen your saw. This is basically just do some research, watch these webinars, go find whatever you can about this, so your cache is loaded with the information you need to ask the right questions, and make sure that you're really getting good answers on the other end. So Stephen Covey coming through, even with the 7 habits of highly effective electrification wanters. Where are things going? Where are things going? This is, what Berkeley put this map together, and we found that this was the best one that we've seen. We've seen a lot of them, but it really shows the phasing that Berkeley is actually doing, but it's got some great information on here of how their whole plan is going locally. But we need to think like this to do our own projects in our own house. We have to be our own advocates on this stuff, because not everybody's 100% on electrification yet. You'll find that when you start talking to contractors. So in 2023, we have to install 6 million heat pumps this year. Anybody out there think that's a pretty lofty goal? We install nothing but heat pumps, and in 2022, we just did under 200 of them, just under 200. That's a lot of heat pumps for a small company like we have, but 6 million is a big, big number. And so we need to, if we're contractors out there, we need to be talking to our customers about replacing their gas furnaces, not with gas furnaces, replacing their water heaters with not gas water heaters. Yesterday, I was over at Lowe's picking up some whatever for a little project I'm doing at my house, and there was a gentleman that was getting assistance pulling a gas water heater down onto a cart. And I probably gave him 2.5 minutes of conversation that he wasn't ready for, and he looked at me like I was nutty. But I said, you should be really thinking about a heat pump water heater for this application. And then I had to go explain what a heat pump water heater is, and the fact that he was going to need electrical outlet. And then by that time, he'd had enough of me. So that's one more home that's going to get a gas water heater installed, which is going to delay their electrification process for a while. And chances are that customer and that contractor, whoever that person was that was picking up that water heater, they just don't understand what's happening. And that's a real problem out there. If we're going to infiltrate the market with 6 million heat pumps, we need to be talking heat pumps. Heat pumps need to be everything we need to talk about. And I've read a lot of articles recently about we need to rebrand heat pumps. And so we call them inverter heating systems over here, or inverter comfort systems, to try to get away from that heat pump language, so that we're a little bit like talking differently than the other contractors out there. But look at this one, 2035. All new cars are 0 emissions or EVs. Now, I read an article the other day about a new combustion engine that's 0 emissions. Well, we'll have to see how that all winds out, because I think they've been talking about that for years. But 2045, we need 100% renewable electric grid in California. That assumes lots of solar and batteries. And I don't know if anybody knows that's in the market for solar and batteries and things like that. The economy or the economics have changed a bit. Ooh, I apologize for that. Turn off your cell phones, by the way. It assumes lots and lots of solar and batteries. And there was the Net Energy Metering 3.0 program just started, changes the economics for rooftop solar a little bit, to where you have to have batteries involved with that in order to make it financially feasible. So we're going to need a lot of these. They're going to need. I'm always reading articles about electrification. So I read another one the other day that currently there's only enough battery power online in California to carry us for about in the United States, for carry us for about a half an hour on battery right now. So we got a long way to go on that. And many of the people we talk to, the final goal is net zero energy of their home. But we also talk to a lot of people that are like, they can't wrap their head around that stove yet, right? So they're going to do everything but the stove. And the one thing that's like really leaking exhaust directly into their house is the one that they're having the biggest problem with. And I'm doing a thing with my neighbor across the street has done everything to his house as I'm doing my house. And he is now at the stove. And we installed his new induction stove over the weekend. And there was a couple of things I didn't fully explain to him. One of them was you need new pans. So none of their pans would work. One of them is on the big burner, you need to put the big pan. On the little burners, you can put the big pan after it's already hot. But there was a teaching moment there. And I think his wife's going to take a little bit of time to come around to that new stove, but they're going to be fine once they figure out how quickly they can make pasta. So a lot of people, final goal is net zero. Other people, it's just being cleaner and being more efficient and reducing their dependence on that really unpredictable gas bill that we can all experience next year. That's going to get way worse over the coming years. This is where most customers are coming from. Most customers are starting from that heating system. That old furnace is kind of played out and its life is ending. And there's some contractors out there talking about heat pumps. We see a lot of contractors not necessarily talking about the most efficient heat pumps, but it is what it is. The water heating is a close second at 95%. Water heaters tend to not last as long as furnaces, so there's more opportunity for replacement on those. This is one of the reasons why you really, really, really need to look at your entire electrification project at your home as a full project, because I tell you, water heaters are a biggie. If that thing goes out, it's going to be uncomfortable conversations with the family. Cooking, 75% of that opportunity is there, and clothes drying, 51%. A lot of the people we talk to don't realize they have an electric dryer already, or don't realize they have a gas dryer. So that's one that's not easy to determine if it's one type or another. So those are going to get going. But typically, one of our projects, if a customer is getting the heating system put in, we're at least pre-wiring for the water heater and recommending pre-wiring for the stove and the dryer at the same time. So when those appliances just kind of naturally fail, the customer can go right out and buy the new one, plug it right in, and they're ready to go. So we use the analogy as house as a system. And so we look at everything through the kaleidoscope of how is one thing we're going to do in here going to affect everything else in here. And so there's things that can happen in here. We plan everything in parallel. So for instance, like combustion safety testing on the water heater, and I mentioned that a couple of minutes ago. But if we go in and tighten up a house really tight, and let's just look at the basement of this house, and let's say this part of the pressure boundary is separated from the house, and I've got a dryer down here that's moving about 150 cubic feet per minute of air out all the time it's operating, and I get rid of this flue pipe for the water or for the furnace, and I put in a heat pump here, but I've still got my water heater here. And a lot of houses we look at, they've been improved. And so somebody has covered up the ventilation systems. And these water heaters, sometimes the flue pipe will actually act as the makeup air when the dryer is on, and it'll start pulling air down through the flue pipe into here. So when the water heater comes on, the exhaust just leaks right into the house. This is not good. But if you think about it, it's not that much different than having a gas stove in your house, but we don't want that either. But a backdrafting water heater can cause really big problems. So this is why it's really important to check out those safety items. Also, we want to make sure that our rooms are connected in such a way that we're not sharing our load with the attic space, so that the pressure boundary between the inside of the house and the attic space is clearly defined, and it's tight, and there's a good insulation barrier up here, so we have completed a good thermal boundary. And just make sure that as we look at the house, we're making suggestions for corrections throughout that are going to be most beneficial for what is the top of our mission statement, which is to provide the most energy efficient system possible. And like I mentioned then, the most energy efficient system to us is not the one with that highest SEER number or EER number. It's the one that's going to fit the house the best and be able to operate the best and give them room by room comfort at a really, really low cost of operation, that can do way better than putting a big system in there that is just has really high efficiency numbers on it. So the most common planning failures is this one. Waiting till you need a water heater is not a good time to think about putting in a heat pump water heater. We have ran across this so many times. We're talking to our customers and we're talking about the water heater, and they go, well, we don't really need a water heater. Ours is only a year old. It went out last year. We really wanted a heat pump. The water was cold, so we just got another gas model. And so kind of the thinking around these customers, I'm going to run that gas model until it's old enough that I can feel good about getting rid of it. We have a policy here. If the unit's under a year old, we'll buy it back for $500. And then we use it. We have a little fleet of loaners out in the shop. If we have a customer that really wants a heat pump water heater and we can't get the whole thing done really quickly because of our schedule, we can definitely get a guy out there to flop in a gas model really quickly. But nowadays, with the 110 volt plugins on the heat pump water heaters, that we're having good success with just popping those in initially, so we can avoid that. But this is one you don't want to deal with, right? Cold showers are not only shocking, they're probably good. I hear they build character. I don't know. I haven't gone down that road myself. But not a lot of people can tolerate cold showers for several days and weeks. I have had one customer a couple of years ago that waited 3 weeks because he had to talk to 3 customers about getting his heat pump water heater installed. And he ended up going with us. We were the first ones that talked to him, but he literally went 3 weeks. He put his family through a period of time for 3 weeks with no hot water. And I was just surprised he was still married on the other end, just knowing how my marriage is, my marriage is awesome, but I do have a wife that likes warm water. No time to research the best solution when you're up against the gun. This goes the same way with the heating and cooling systems too. I'll talk about that in a minute. Then we tend to gravitate towards who could do it the quickest, and then the second thing is who could do it the cheapest at that point. And then we've gotten completely away from who can do it the best and who can put in a solution for me that's going to make my house kind of future proof. So we find a lot that people get into these rush transactions, and that can really handicap long-term goals. This is big in the HVAC side. We'll talk about that right now. Choosing the wrong heat pump. But really, let's go back to waiting for an emergency on a heating system. If you have a furnace and it's a number of years old and it's needed service before, and you have a feeling in the back of your mind that it's getting older, or a technician has told you it was getting older, or they offered you one, start looking for a heat pump now so you can get your prices in line and figure out what you're going to do. And so you're not in a rush transaction, because generally, like with us, we're usually booked out a couple of months. And so if you were to come and call me today and tell me your furnace was broken and you needed something, probably what we do is come out and fix your furnace. But if it's a cracked heat exchanger or something, you're not going to want to do that. But getting those rush transactions, buying a furnace when your house is 52 degrees is not a good way to make a decision. Buying a new air conditioner or a heat pump for cooling when your house is 90 degrees in the summer and your air conditioning is broken is not a good time. You could possibly make a decision there that you wouldn't make if you were comfortable in your home. Get the house back comfortable, fix that unit, and then figure out the right path. Don't fall into it's broke right now, I got to fix it. Another thing, if you call a technician out and they tell you that you need a new system, you may need a new system, but you may be able to get that one fixed long enough to be able to design the right system. Don't always go for the first option on that. Maintenance technicians sell the most heating and air conditioning systems in the entire industry. And it's done by coming out to do a tune-up that you pay a low price for, and they find a fatal flaw with the system, or there's a major problem with it. Just unless they can talk to you about upgrading and getting the right system in your house, which is hard because they have 4 or 5 calls per day. It's really a kind of a rush transaction. So just be mindful of that. Choosing the wrong heat pump or heat pump water heater can also be hugely problematic. If you if you get the wrong heat pump installed by somebody that doesn't understand how to make them perform well, which, you know, we have another training program that we do where we train contractors all over the state. And we actually do this remote 3-day training. It's really cool, it's fun. But everybody that leaves that training, and these are all guys that took time out of their schedule to come do a 3-day training, and they're all contractors who've been in business for a long time. And a lot of them are guys that are my age, right? You would think that they're kind of set in their ways. They get this 3-day training, and we get this feedback from them like, oh, I want to put one of these in my house, and I want to make sure I do all these right. How can I do that? What's my best path moving forward? There are contractors out there that really want to get this stuff done, but there's also some that kind of just want to, you know, work with their recipe book. So if you're going to get a heat pump installed, talk to a few people and find somebody that is willing to look at different types of units and do calculations and things like that. Because an incorrectly sized unit can cost you thousands more in kilowatt hours a year for making that decision wrong. Right-sized inverter heat pumps can adjust to future building improvements. Now, we always right-size everything. We'll talk about that more in a few slides, but we right-size. And we also only install inverter technology. And inverter technology is a system that can speed up and slow down because it gives you exactly what you need in real time, depending on what the weather is outside and how comfortable you want to be inside. These systems, almost like magic, can figure out how to keep your house perfectly comfortable no matter what's going on around there. So the beauty of these two is we could size one of these for a house that has old windows, knowing you're going to get windows in a year. And that system, when you get those new windows, it'll just slow down and be the right size. But you have to properly size them in order to do that. If you get an inverter system in that's the same size as what you have, it may not slow down far enough to make adjustments on the other improvements you're going to do. So do some research, watch these videos, ask the right questions. There are a lot of heat pump water heater options out there right now, like unitary systems with the heat pump on top, hybrid models with the heat pump on top, and built-in supplemental heaters, so it can get the water much warmer, much quicker, kind of gets a little bit closer to a gas water heater recovery rate. We have these now that can be ducted outside, so there's no influence for us pulling air out of the house and ducting it into the attic, or it's not going to make any pressure differential problems in the house. There's also split system heat pumps that are really cool if noise is an issue, or if you have to put a tank in a really small spot. There's tons and tons of these different options available now. We're really living in a sweet spot for this technology. We've got great 120 volt options. Now, I have a 120 volt heat pump water heater in my house. That means it only has the heat pump on top. It does not have the supplemental heaters inside. And so you have to put a bigger tank in when you do that, and you get the tank of water really hot, and then you mix the water temperature down a little bit, and you have plenty of capacity. You're never going to know it's 120 volt. And if you've got problems in the house where we're trying to electrify a lot of things on a smaller panel, those can be perfect. So understand your budget. Don't be like Homer Simpson and just go spend all your money on beer. We do need to spend or take some money and budget it for electrification. This is not an inexpensive thing to do, especially to do it correctly, to where it's going to cost you less to operate. But if you take the time and you design and engineer a system up front, it may cost a little bit more up front to get it installed right and get a system that's built right precisely for your home, but it's going to cost a lot less to operate later. So it's just today's money versus tomorrow's money. And one thing we do know is energy costs are going up. Gas prices are going up. A lot of energy is being generated from gas. Electric prices are going to reflect gas prices on some level. They're not going to go nearly as high or be as kind of out of control as gas prices will in the next few years. But electric prices will go up over time. So putting in a system that's going to use the least amount of energy possible is the most important thing you can do. If you've got a good, better, best in front of you, look at the best. If it's significantly more efficient, it costs a little bit more upfront, do that. Don't buy the cheap one, or you're going to kick yourself in the butt later when you get those electric bills. If you know what everything costs in advance, if you do this and you plan for it, you can save for it, right? It's not going to be an emergency. Let's just get this plan going. Although I will tell you, if you plan out a 5-year plan for all this, Don't expect that system to be the same price in 5 years as it is today. There are some things you can prepay down. Like we did a couple last year where the customers gave us enough money to buy the equipment up front, and then they paid the different differential in labor cost, and they waited a year to put it in, but they had paid for everything at that pricing, because equipment costs have really gone crazy over the last few years, and they're going to keep going up. So without proper planning and appliance selection, it might be hard to make your dollar stretch and fully electrify in your timeline. So figure out your timeline, plan these things proper, go back to Stephen Covey, begin with the end in sight, and make sure we select the correct appliances. You should get a few people's opinions on this, and we still hear from our customers all the time. I had 4 guys out, all 4 of them had a different idea, and I'll tell the customer, well, you haven't seen a different idea at all until you see ours. Not leaving enough space. We run into this stuff quite often. So what we have here is a whole bunch of infrastructure that can't have a system in front of it on the side of the house. Over here, we have a dryer vent. Over here, we have an intake flue. There's not a lot of places to put anything on here. Certain cities have requirements to where the clearance between the house and the property line have to be a specific amount. So some of the cities will let you get away with like mounting the heat pump high on the wall so the firemen can still get down the side of the property. But there's these standoff and city by city requirements. You want to call a contractor that's familiar with the city that you're in and has the information. We keep this cool little cheat sheet right by our desk. And so I have all the cities and all the requirements that we work in right at my desk so we can speak intelligently during our virtual assessments. They do require an indoor and an outdoor unit. So if you just have a furnace now, understand there is going to need to be a piece outside. All these codes with distances and everything are really, really important, because if you get caught up in one of these, we did have one a few years ago where the city did make them move it to the backyard, even though they had the proper clearance, because they didn't ask the neighbor if it was okay. Architects, please, architects, and I know they changed the rules on this a few years ago, but back in the day when we were doing design build stuff for houses that were absolutely gorgeous, but had no place to put a duct, no place to put a unit. Basically, the solution was to put a unit on each wall. Then the interior decorator was like, no mas, we're not doing that. And the aesthetic eye of the house says, there's no way there's going that on my wall. So we have to put in some kind of convoluted solution that's never going to provide real comfort. So architects, design this into the house, and make sure that there's adequate space to run the ducting if you're going to run ducting, or the homeowner knows what type of system is going to go in. We have a lot of options for equipment nowadays that we didn't have just a few years ago. So we can do a lot of things, but when you call us out to a house and it's already framed up and the plumber's already been there and the electrician's already got his wires going to and fro, and then you say, hey, I need an air conditioning system for this, you're really cutting us off at the knees of being able to do a high performance system. One of the reasons I don't like new construction. Remember the water heaters, they require space for air exchange. So if you have a little water heater in a little closet somewhere and you want to put a heat pump water heater there, heat pump water heaters move air, they don't exhaust gases. So traditional water heater, the burner comes on, it creates lift inside the heat exchanger. That lift creates draw through the bottom. There's a very small amount of air coming in there, just enough to oxygenate the flame and cause the lifting reaction. And so it doesn't need a lot of air in there. A heat pump water heater is going to move 75 cubic feet per minute of air through it, but between 50 and 75. So there's a lot of air that needs to move through the system to grab heat out of the air. So you need to make sure that you're prepared to duct the unit out the side, bring an intake vent in, talk to somebody that knows this. Most heat pump water heaters want 700 or 400 cubic feet of total space around it. So if it's going in a big room in the basement or it's going in your garage, no problem. Little closet, there has to be a design around how you're going to get that air to flow around that system. Otherwise, it's not going to operate at peak efficiency. Oh, this one's a biggie too. Heat pump water heaters need to be bigger than gas water heaters. If you have a 50-gallon gas water heater, chances are you're going to need a 65 or an 80-gallon heat pump water heater. And the reason for that is we want to store the hot water there. We want the volume of water stored at a high temperature, and then we mix the temperature down a little bit, and then that gives us a little bit more capacity because it can't recoup the temperature of the water as quickly as a gas water heater can. So we need to have more storage. And now we want to offset storage times. We want to put these units in so that we can run them between 8 o'clock in the morning or between 9 p.m. and all the way around to 4 p.m. the next day. We want to be able to run them during that period of time and then shut them off between 4 and 9. And if you use a lot of hot water between 4 and 9, whether you're doing dishes or doing laundry or doing or taking your showers during that amount of time, you need to have that much water there. We want to take it and use it, charge it up when the power's cheap, so that we can use it when the power's expensive. It's just a battery. Boy, I could go for an hour and a half just on this topic. Recently, it seems recent, but last year, the federal government came out with the IRA program. And so there was a lot of press and kind of fanfare around this IRA program. And it wasn't 20 minutes after these stories came out and we were getting phone calls saying, hey, I think I want to hold off on my job until next year when the IRA is available. And I'm like, okay, but we don't know anything about it at this point. And he says, yeah, that's a $2,000 tax credit. Sounds pretty good. And so what we found is a bunch of our customers said, we're going to wait. And then the regulations for the efficiencies came out. And so those regulations for efficiencies came out right about the same time that they changed the efficiency rating kind of scheme on how they were rating HVAC systems to the SEER and EER2. And so they basically downgraded the efficiency of a bunch of systems because they were in specific climate zones. Well, that eliminated certain systems from being available for that tax credit. So we had people wait a long time to get a system put in to get a tax credit that wasn't going to be available for them. And the cost of the system increased over that period of time more than the tax credit would have anyway. So the time you need the system is the best time to buy it. Costs tend to go up over time as labor, overhead, and everything else increase. This is not like solar. The reason solar got so cheap is because we can create more energy out of the same square footage of space. So you need fewer panels to do the same job. Heat pumps aren't going to be that way. Now with us, we can design a system that's going to be nice and small and keep you really comfortable. So that saves a little bit, but we haven't really seen prices fluctuate back and forth. We've only kind of seen them go one direction. They may not go back down when supply meets demand, but we need to install 6 million heat pumps in California. There's going to be some demand. So we're not likely to see the same downward trajectory as solar, but we haven't seen all the technologies that are going to come out yet. So, but one thing that's not going to change is all my people want to get paid more every year. My overhead goes up because insurance gets more and more every year. The cost of gasoline to put in our trucks goes up every year. The cost of doing business goes up every year. So even if there's a small downward trend in equipment cost, it's going to be a small number in there, far less than waiting and having all of these kind of things just drive costs up. So incentive programs tend to run out of funds eventually as well. We had that go on with one of the big programs that was happening last year, and it was not an energy efficiency program, it was a clean air program, and it was hugely successful. It was successful to the point where they ran out of money in about 1/3 of the time that they had originally projected, which was a huge score on their side. Like, we installed this many heat pumps and we gave out this much money, and this is a huge success. The only problem is a lot of people were like waiting in the wings. All the people that purchased them towards the end when they were running out of money, those people got that phone call from the contractor saying, I'm sorry, but the funds have run out. It completely changes the economics of what we're doing. And so we got to be ready for that. When the incentives are out there, grab them up, Right now, incentives are, especially if you're looking at a heat pump water heater and getting a heat pump installed in the Bay Area, especially, and really all over the state, the incentives are at their peak again. Now is the time to jump on this stuff. Don't wait because you're going to think you make more money later, because it usually doesn't work out that way. Attic insulation. If you don't prep, so we see this all the time too. Like, hey, I got my insulation installed last year. That was our first step. Well, whoever came out there and advised them of that wasn't a good idea, because we need to go put equipment or wiring or all this stuff in the attic space. And now I've got this fully insulated attic that's going to get trampled down, and it's going to make a huge mess. Now we have to cut holes in the ceiling potentially. All this insulation is above it. It increases the time on the job disproportionate a lot. And then, so all of these things kind of add in. And when we're doing a project like this, if we're doing a unit in the attic, we want to lay our ducts underneath this stuff. If it's already in, that's really hard to do. So insulation, maybe not the first thing to do. If you've already got it in the attic and you put it in 5 years ago, we can work with that. But don't use that as your first step. That should be the last thing you do. If we go up here and we trample down this insulation, you paid a lot of money for all this R value. That R value is just gonna go away. If we have a bunch of people trampling through here, it's gonna be really bad. If you've got knob and tube in your attic, put that as part of your budget. Change out the knob and tube, because really you don't want to be blowing insulation over knob and tube. Even if a contractor comes out, an electrical guy comes out and he says, look, your knob and tube is the best I've ever seen. There's no splices that the guy did 45 years ago. There's no places where the rats have eaten the insulation. It's beautiful. It's the most perfect knob and tube ever. I still wouldn't cover it with insulation. I don't recommend people do that. Number one, if you're going to electrify your house, you're going to want some grounds in the house, right? You want to have the whole house be modernized. Take the time, work that into your budget, change out the knob and tube if you can. Take care of the ductwork. Take care of the ductwork. If you have ductwork in your attic and it's strapped up high and you put insulation underneath, you missed an opportunity at saving a dramatic amount of energy and cost. So attic insulation, make sure it's going to be done in the right order. Electrical issues. This guy got a little too close to a hot panel and he didn't take my advice. You know, wear rubber gloves, wear rubber boots, and don't stand in water. Obviously, this guy didn't do that when he opened the breaker box. But so unnecessary panel replacements. We see this a lot. It's getting better out there. We've seen some of the numbers that are reflecting more contractors are understanding that just because all the breaker spaces are full doesn't mean you need a new panel. But we ran into this a couple of times last year, and we'll refresh on. There's another slide that focuses on that, so I won't talk about it. Yeah. So if you've got a lot of space in there, or you don't have a lot of space in there, sometimes we need to look at what we call good electrification. That's basically our terminology for watt diet. But just make sure that you're adding the right loads in the right order and using as low energy as loads as possible, so it frees up space for other things. We have a project going, or we did it last week. There was a 50 amp wire running to the existing air conditioning unit. The unit we put in only needed 20 amps. So we were able to put a 20 amp breaker in there and a 20 amp disconnect out. We still use the old wire, but that wire will never have a problem overheating. But we were able to free up an additional 30 amps of space in the panel by putting in a low energy heat pump system. So these are things that we can do to free up spaces, but you have to have somebody that can dynamically understand how all of these things work. So people that have gone to our training pretty much know that. So if you're not sure you'll be in the house or not sure you'll electrify, totally go with the watt diet stuff. Get a heat pump dryer, get a 110 volt heat pump water heater. Don't necessarily spend the extra money on doing that panel, because if you've gone through the process of trying to get an electrical panel, it can be arduous. And especially if there's any complications that pop up, it can take a long time. So take up extra space in the breaker box. We can use quad breakers and things like that. leaving enough wire in the panels are really an important thing. Use a contractor that understands all this, or make sure that your electrical contractor and your HVAC contractor or your heat pump guy or your solar people, make sure all these people are talking to each other. So we had one happen recently. Customer wanted to get the solar in before the cutoff time in April. And so this happened at the beginning of the year. We were in contract to do the heat pump and the heat pump water heater. Solar guy rolls in there, takes our breaker space that we were going to use. Completely didn't know about it until we got out there. I'll show you. I think we focus on his there, but we had to use some circuit splitting technology that wasn't in the original quote, so it ended up costing them a little bit more money. Just kind of things were done out of order. We never got like a courtesy call and said, "Hey, we're getting the solar put in." So just make sure everybody's talking to each other. And this is another one. Install efficiently. That's the whole thing about our series of slides here is electrify efficiently. It's going to cause less issues. Good electrification, watt diet, load calculation, and alternative technologies. Look at these things because they might be exactly what you need. Circle back to PG&E. Once you get the systems installed, circle back to the utility company. This is a lifesaver. I'll tell you how this worked out at my house. So when you put a heat pump in and get rid of your gas furnace, you'll notice if you look on your PG&E bill, it will say heat source and it'll say electric or it'll say not electric. And so if it says not electric, it means you're getting the gas benefit. In other words, in the wintertime, they're giving you a little bit more of the tier 1 gas because they know you're heating your house and they don't want to, they're trying to help you afford gas as much as you can, although even the cheap gas was expensive last year and going to be even higher in the coming years. Once you change to electric, you need to let PG&E know. So I called them about a month after I put my heat pump in and said, "Hey, I switched to electric." They said, "Great, we will reflect that on your bill." So I'm watching my bills come through and I'm going, it still says electric, it still says not electric, not electric. Call them back about 4 months later. I'm like, "Hey, what's up?" And they says, "Oh, I see your order in the queue. It just takes a long time." This was kind of right after COVID. I said, "Okay." Another 4 months, watch the thing. I'm going, this is a problem. So I call somebody. I happen to talk to somebody that in that interim learned something else, or the guy that knew, and he says, "No, you got to call the solar department because you have a solar and battery on your house." So I had to call the solar department to do that. And then they got it done within 3 weeks. So the nice thing was they gave me a retroactive credit for all of that baseline gas that I didn't use, or that I didn't use during that period of time, that I would have had my lower electrical rate. And it was like an $800 credit. My house ran off that credit for a long time. I can't even remember when I started actually paying PG&E again. So you want to do this when you get your stuff put in. Call for that E-rate plan. Let them know that you've got a heat pump in there and you're not doing gas anymore, and you're gonna thank us later. So order of operations. These, if you're looking to get started right away, this is the things you should pay attention to. Is first and foremost, fix any safety issues you have. If you're going to get a new heat pump installed and you don't do a safety survey like we do when we come out to the house, if you're just getting a heat pump installed and not doing the water heater, we really look at the water heater and we really look at any kind of combustion issues that might be happening in the house. Because remember, we're going to come in, and most companies, you're going to want them to do this if you're putting in a heat pump. You're going to want them to seal the attic space. You're going to want them to insulate, which is going to make your house tighter. So if you've got ventilation problems with your water heater, it could exacerbate those and make them worse. So look at those safety issues up front. And I don't know if you kind of see this slide. This is a water heater, and this is a piece of dryer vent. So, and this whole picture right here sums up why you should never have a handyman go to Home Depot and buy a water heater. And this is why they shouldn't sell water heaters to homeowners. It's just my opinion, folks. Not trying to be controversial. Up here we have this is one that I actually found on a job site, and I have this in our training because I asked guys, what do you see when you see this? And what was happening with this one is they had taken out an old, what we call a gravity flue furnace, had a big old flue pipe, like a 6-inch flue pipe, and then they tapered down the flue pipe to a 4-inch, and then they put an induced draft heater in. An induced draft heater just has a fan on it that blows the exhaust out. Well, what was happening on here when they did that is it was causing the flue gas to short circuit. It was just blowing the exhaust right out here. So when this water heater came on, there was pressure coming through here when the furnace was running, and all of the exhaust was just coming right into the house. So major problem happening in a lot of houses. You have to have somebody that can understand when they look at this stuff to see if something's going on. Down here, crack in the heat exchanger. Man, as a heating and air conditioning guy back in the day when I was younger, and we'd stick the camera in there, we'd find one of these things, and it was like, oh my God, I found a crack in the heat exchanger. This could have really caused your family harm. It's time for a new furnace. And now that I'm an electrification guy and I've kind of come around to the idea of not having furnaces in the house, I'm really looking at all those ones that we had sold in relation to that, going, I took out a death trap and put in a new one. So one of the things that heat pumps can't do is this, right? There's no issue with combustion or gas safety or anything when you have electrification. But long story short, if you find one of these mid-project, this might change your plan a bit. Get those fixed safety issues figured out. Also, if you've got asbestos in there, and you have a contractor comes out and says, you know, you don't need to worry about the asbestos. I'm just going to hook your heat pump up to this old ductwork. I'm going to save you a few $1,000s. And we know this happens because we have contractors or customers that tell us all the time that a couple of the contractors wanted to use the old ductwork and said the asbestos was fine. If you've got asbestos in your house, take this opportunity to get rid of it. Get that stuff out of your house. This is really, really bad stuff. This was from an era before we knew better. So we know better now. If you find mold problems, this was in next to a water heater that we had. This water heater was actually dripping water onto the burner. And so the burner was heating the water and was creating steam in this closet, and it completely saturated some of the drywall in here. So we had to take the drywall out. We replaced it with foam board and sealed it all up, but got to look at that. Look for the rat droppings. Make sure you're looking up there. If you know you've got rat problems, be prepared to get the insulation taken out, fix the rat problem, and then before you re-insulate, before you air seal. Another benefit to doing this and pulling everything out is you can also do a better job air sealing. Wiring hazards is a big one. This is off of a job we did about 3 months ago. And obviously, either homeowner handyman install the bath fan, never really hooked up the vent, so you could see the bath fan was blowing the insulation. So it was pulling the steam out of the bathroom and putting it directly into the attic. If we were back east or in the snow area, this would have caused a huge problem with the durability of the house. It does anyway, because you don't want to shoot a bunch of humid air up into your attic space. They need to be vented, but that wasn't the big problem on this. The big problem was like all the wiring that was done outside of junction boxes. This is a junction box right here. All of this wire that was done, this added about 7 hours of time. This and all the other problems in the wiring in this house added about 7 hours of labor for our electrician to come out and box all this stuff up and make it right. It's important that you take care of this before you get these other phases done. You don't want to bury this stuff in the attic. So it's really important that you get the right people. So if you're gonna get quotes from people and ask them about the attic insulation, say, can you show me some pictures? Hey, did you happen to take a picture of my bath fan? Did you happen to take a picture? Did you see any problems with the wiring? You're going in. This is this thing, sharpening your sword. The seventh habit of the highly effective electrification seekers is sharpen your sword. Understand all this stuff. Ask the right questions. It's a win-win for everybody. Electrical panel assessments. Make sure the contractors can do an electrical panel assessment. What space there is. You know, this breaker is an old breaker box. I don't know if anybody on this call can recognize this for what it is. It's a Zinsco panel. In the contracting world, if you mention Zinsco panel, some people they like cringe at the idea of a Zinsco panel. But ultimately, if this panel's in good shape, it can keep going. And I would not be afraid to add loads to this, especially if they were planning an electrical upgrade later and we were just dropping into this panel to get them their heating system or their heat pump water heater. until they got the new panel changed out, say with the solar and batteries. But I always recommend that this be part of a long-term plan. If you have one of these older type panels, there's a couple of brands out here like that. You want to check and make sure what your incoming service level is. A lot of these have 100 amp breakers in them, but they're rated, the wire is 125 amp rated wire, so there is a little bit of ability to up the panel. But I will tell you also, if there's a gas meter sitting down below this, if there's a gas meter within 36 inches of this electrical panel, better to electrify, get rid of the gas meter. It will uncomplicate the idea of having to move the panel. So that's another thing. If you get the right person out to give you the good advice, they might say, hold on to this. Let's put in 110 volt heat pump water heater. We got plenty of room in here for your heat pump. Let's just put everything into here, get rid of that gas meter. And when we do the electrical upgrade, then you can, use a circuit sharing device like this for the dryer to share with a water heater, or some whatever the strategy needs to be able to keep this, get rid of the gas meter, then put the panel in. You're going to find it to be wholly less complicated. So planned panel upgrades are better. These things can smoke on a weekend. We had a customer whose panel like burned up on a weekend, had to have the panel replaced on a Sunday. You could not get a permit on a Sunday, and you could not get a disconnect on a Sunday. So they had to do this thing. They were able to get it permitted and signed off the following week, but once in a while that happens. PG&E doesn't really like that very much. But if your panel goes up in smoke on a Sunday, you got to get it fixed. Pre-wiring, we mentioned this. Pre-wire to be electric ready. Pre-wire for that car charger. Pre-wire for that dryer. Pre-wire for that heat pump water heater. Make sure that that's in the scope. Look at the scope, plan it out, see where you're going to go in your electrification process, and make a plan to get there. And by all means, don't hire the wrong guy in the front that's going to screw that whole plan up by putting in something that is not part of your whole watt diet or good electrification kind of approach. Address the ductwork. Ductwork that was designed for a big giant furnace and air conditioner is probably not going to be properly designed for the heat pump that might replace it. When we put in a heat pump, they are far less capacity than a gas furnace, which means I'm going to need more velocity or less velocity depending on the application. I may need different size registers or different size ducts. Be prepared to understand that the ductwork might have to be at least significantly modified, if not completely replaced. And if you have problems with the ductwork, usually if you talk to 3 or 4 contractors, what we've found by talking to our customers is like 2 of the guys said the ductwork was fine. One guy said it needed to be replaced. My first reaction is to go with the guy that says it needs to be replaced, because ductwork we don't make any money off ductwork. It's hard, especially to do it properly. So chances are the other guys that were recommending not replacing the ductwork might have just wanting to be taking a shortcut. So, but you have to know for sure. So get the opinion together. Older systems, the ductwork leaks about 30%. So that's like every $100 worth of gas you put into this, $30 of that heated air is leaving before it ever gets to your house. When we have a smaller heat pump system installed on potentially poor ductwork, we're using a lot less capacity to heat the air. Our machine is speeding up and slowing down. If I'm losing a lot of capacity to the ductwork environment, that is taking away from my ability to deliver that heat into the house. There's also a thing called conductive losses, and I'll show you what that actually is in a minute, so we won't go too deeply into that. Sizing the equipment for the ductwork. If you're taking out a unit that can do 1,600 cubic feet per minute of airflow, and you're putting in one that does 1,000 cubic feet per minute of airflow, that might be okay on one side of the ductwork, but it might not be on the other. And then if you're talking to a heat pump estimator, and they're not telling you need to change out your registers, and you've got the old registers that like blow air in multiple directions, even if it's 2 ways or 3 ways, That guy doesn't understand what he's doing. I don't want to be mean about it, but the guy doesn't understand what he's doing. Registers need to be replaced on all heat pump systems unless you want near room temperature air to be blowing directly on you when you're trying to heat the house. So it's important for us to manage the airflow direction, manage the airspeed, do all that to get the right heat pump installed. Beat that one up, good. Improve the envelope, air sealing and insulation. Want to do this. If you've got cavities in your attic space, you want to get them fixed. The way you fix those is you just add some duct board and then you foam it out and you make it part of the inside of the house, not part of the outside of the house. If you live in a house with a crawl space that's been built in the last 100 years before 2020, 1990 maybe, there's going to be a big giant hole under the bathtub. These need to be fixed. These are giant hole cold air hemorrhages. We need to seal all this stuff up. Underneath crawl spaces is really cold. I'm trying to heat your house. I'm leaking cold air into the house. My heat pump has to work harder to offset that. So, and in any case you can, if you can pull the insulation out of the attic and really do a good seal job, you'll benefit from that. It's worth the extra cost. It should be in your budget. And when you're doing this, you need to put enough insulation in when you're done. So we always do our attics to R50, and R50 means that it's resistant, 50-degree resistance. So if it's 125 degrees in your attic and it's 75 degrees down here in your house, we're not going to move any energy down through your ceiling. This is huge because if you only have this much insulation in the attic, it only needs to be 25 degrees warmer or 20 degrees warmer in the attic than the house before I start moving a lot of energy down through the ceiling. And when I'm moving energy down through the ceiling in the summertime, my machine has to remove that energy, and that costs money. So in the interim, in the heating side, if I've got a little bit of insulation like this, I've got R20, it means if I've got a cold attic up here and my room or my ceiling is 20 degrees warmer than the attic, I'm going to start pulling heat out through the house. So I'm also migrating heat out. And that's where a lot of that cold will come in from the bottom side. So having as much insulation as you can in a house with a heat pump is extraordinarily important, and R50 is great. And these, our ductwork is underneath this stuff. So let's talk about that, calculating the duct gain. So if you live in a house that's got the ductwork in the attic, there is a certain amount of energy that's going to be expended on keeping those ducts either warm in the winter or cool in the summer. So it's really easy to figure out. We do it by looking at the summer numbers. So all of our examples are always a 1,500 square foot house with a 125 degree attic, 55 degrees supply air temperature. This means if my air conditioning is running and I've got a 75 degree house, I should be able to put 55 degree air in. My unit's taking in 75 degree air, it's cooling at 20 degrees, and I got 55 degree air inside the ductwork. So I'm blowing 55 degree air through all those ducts in the hot attic space, sitting up there in the 125 degree attic. And if you have a house that has metal ductwork with yellow insulation on it, it has really old R4 ductwork that's kind of falling apart, or there's some metal showing here or there, or the plenums aren't insulated, you can average use is, we call it R3 at that point. Some duct systems might have R8, so you would just use that different number. So here's how you do the math. We're using the assumption, and this is a BPI standard. If you have a 1,000 square foot house and we took all the ductwork out of the attic and we sliced it down the middle and we measured it, it's right about 40% of the square footage equals the surface area of the ductwork. So we're going to use that in our equation, 40%. So we take a 1,500 square foot house times 0.4. This is going to give us the internal duct surface area. And we're going to times that by the temperature difference, and then we're going to divide that by the R value. And what that looks like is 42,000. Basically, that system, that 1,500 square foot house with R3 ductwork on it, with a 125 degree attic, and believe me, it gets way hotter than 125 in the attic. This is a conservative number. And we're running air conditioning with 55 degree air blowing into this really hot ductwork. We're going to use 14,000 BTUs of capacity to keep this duct neutral. So in order to get this air through here and get it to where it's actually delivering that 55, we have to expend 14,000 BTUs of cooling energy to cool the ducts down enough to deliver that air. This is why some people's air conditioners don't work really well when it gets hot outside, because the attic temperatures are just nuts and we're using so much capacity. So what happens when we insulate the attic to R50? We'll say, let's look at that. So we're going to take the same numbers, and then when we insulate the ductwork to R50 and we keep the new ductwork down low, we can bury that ductwork with insulation. And when I bury a duct with insulation, it has like infinite R value on two sides and the bottom, really. And then it might even have a little duct, a little top of the duct crowning out of the top. Doesn't really matter because we're looking at average R value on everything. So if we can get that average R value up to 30, we're now only using 1,400 BTUs lost to the hot attic. So what have we done here? We've gained an entire 1 ton of cooling capacity by doing this. So it's really easy for us to downsize systems, especially when the ductwork is in the attic, by doing these measures. And this is kind of how we do it, putting the right size systems in. But let's just think about what we were talking about a minute ago. If you had some guy, you got your ductwork all strapped up here in the attic, and you had some guy come in, maybe the attic cleanup guys, and they said, hey, we'll get rid of all rat turds, we'll air seal a couple things, and we'll put new R38. And they like R38 for whatever reason. We'll put some new R38 insulation in there, but your ductwork is still up here. You're going to miss the opportunity for all this capacity savings. And this capacity savings is roughly 30% of the cooling cost of your system over however long you're going to own that system. So if you're going to pay, I don't know, $50 a month in the summertime, 30% of that cost is going away in your attic space just because of losing it to the hot attic. So really important you do this stuff in the right order. Next thing that is super important, number 7 here, is have a company come out that will do an actual load calculation. In other words, measure their house, measure the windows, measure the room, slide it all into a computer program that tells us exactly what size windows we have, what the quality of the windows are, takes all this stuff into consideration. These load calculations will actually tell us exactly how much airflow we need in each room. And so we can get a really, really balanced system. So not only that, it will tell us how much capacity the actual system needs. Now we know these by doing over 1,000 of these, but getting that room by room airflow is what really the most important part is to giving you a really, really comfortable outcome on the other end. Now check this out. These are these two rooms up here, spare bedroom 1 and spare bedroom 2. This is now in this house, these people are friends of mine. This is now, since they bought this house, this is master bedroom, and this is daughter's room, and this is son room. When they bought this house, they didn't have their 2 kids that they have now. An interesting story. So both of these rooms are 9 foot by 10 foot, both of them 90 square feet. Both of them have the same size windows. One of them needs 48 basketballs of air every minute. One of them needs 31 basketballs of air every minute. And I usually ask my contractors that are in the class, you know, why is this? And HVAC contractors, they're pretty smart guys. We know stuff in houses. We know how to fix units. We know how to do stuff. But it's amazing how many of them don't get this. Like, they don't understand that a room with 2 outside walls is going to have Mother Nature influencing on 2 sides, and it's going to require more air. So if you're dealing with a company that doesn't understand this and they're just going to put a couple of ducts in here, what's going to happen is this room is either going to be always hot and always cold, or this room is going to be it's going to be cold in the summer and hot in the winter, or this one's going to be hot in the summer and cold in the winter. Or you're just going to get way too much air and it's going to be out of balance anyway. But so it's really, really important to know this so that when you walk through your house in your underwear in the middle of the night, when you get up to go get a glass of water, your whole house is the same temperature. There's a certain satisfaction to that, I have to tell you. So staging examples. This is scenarios where maybe the right order wasn't managed and it cost a few bucks. So there's some good ones here. This is the typical electrification measures that people are going to do. LED lighting, everybody's done this one by now. If you haven't done it, go to the hardware store. These lights cost nothing anymore. So get that done first. Induction cooktops. If you're still using a gas range, Amazon has an awesome double induction cooktop that plugs right into the outlet, and you can cook on that so you're not blowing the poison off the gas burners into the house all the time. That's virtually like leaving your car in the garage with the engine running. Is about the same as having your gas range run. I know that sounds a little out there, but we've seen the studies. The replacing your gas furnace with a heat pump, getting that heat pump water heater, solar PV, electrical panel upgrade, maybe about this point, battery storage, EV charging. This is why I don't like to change out panels until we know what the battery storage and the car charging scenario is going to be. And then, the heat pump clothes dryer is a great option for downsizing when we can completely eliminate that 30 amp circuit. You can charge 2 cars. If you have 2 Teslas and you have an electric dryer and you're wondering how you're going to charge it, you can get one of these, charge your units on 30 amps, and this unit will, when one car is fully charged, it'll shut off and charge the other one. So you can do that with a clothes dryer outlet and use a 110 volt clothes dryer. There's all kinds of cool things you can do to stretch those loads. Anyway, so common Bay Area example, we have a 100 amp service, the house has got an electric dryer. Our mission is to get rid of the furnace, the water heater, and the range. So what do? We proposed the heat pump system, the heat pump water heater, the induction range. That's all fine. This is really what we run up against. This is how we challenge this, right? So we keep the panel in space. We specify a low capacity heat pump split dryer or split heat pump, a split dryer with heat pump water heater, or we split the dryer with the heat pump water heater. So we can use the circuit sharing device to share the circuit with the dryer and the heat pump water heater. And the way that works is there's a primary and secondary on these splitters. If you're running your dryer on primary, it just won't run the heat pump water heater. So that could be a problem if it was like us yesterday when we did 11 loads of laundry at our house yesterday. So better to get a 110 volt heat pump water heater like I did. So pre-wire for the future range, save up for the solar EV and new panel. Same scenario, keep panel in place, get a low capacity heat pump. That's what we would install, the actual heat pump, 20 amps, get a 120 volt heat pump water heater, and then split the range with an EV charger and get a heat pump dryer that you plug in. Now we don't have any worries here with this 100 amp service, absolutely no worries. We're not coming anywhere close. So hopefully that was helpful. This is when we talk about this a lot, this is a house we did in Richmond, and we didn't do the heat pump on this house. We were called in to do the heat pump water heater, and this is kind of when this Pandora's box opened. So we want to let this information is super important. So this customer had a house that was just under 1,200 square feet. Contractor, thinking he was doing a great thing, he did a really nice install actually, but he just didn't understand what he was doing. So they put in a 3-ton, super expensive inverter heat pump system that, if he would have looked in the specs, will operate at temperatures way lower than the reasonable load temperature on the load calc of the area. They put in a 220 volt air handler with this unit, and they put in a 10 kilowatt heat strip. So they had 3 220 volt circuits needed to go into the panel. The panel was old, so they told the customer, we need a new electrical panel. This isn't going to work with your electrical panel. They got a new electrical panel installed, a 125 amp. They loaded it with 70 amps of potential use here with this, 60 amps. So we came in to do the heat pump water heater. Really, this was a couple years ago before the 110s were even there. I would have recommended a 110 for him now looking back, but he also wanted to do his range and his dryer, and he was getting solar and batteries installed at the same time. Well, problematic. He was not able to do all that because when they took out his new panel, they put in a 125 amp panel. Now he's going over and above that because of the decision that was made here. So by the time this guy ended up spending all of this money, the solar battery money, heat pump panel, all of the stuff. So the multiple panel replacements, oversized the HVAC. So he spent so much money on this thing. And a more expensive solar system, because his solar system was designed around the load of all this. So he got way more stuff than he needed. And he really, if he would have just got the low energy heat pump put in there with one 20 amp breaker that fed the whole thing, all of this could have been avoided. He could have used what he had on one 125 amp panel. He could have saved like 25 grand on this job. This is the probably the most egregious example we have of this. This is a house in Oakland. Okay, I mentioned this guy. So this guy, major remodel on the house. This thing had a Pandora's box of electrical. Nothing was labeled right. It looked like he had a sub panel going to a sub panel in his garage, but it wasn't actually in his garage. It was kind of a mess. So he needed a heat pump water heater, 2 heat pumps, and a circuit splitter is what we ended up putting in. But we got out there and realized that they had done some more work in the panel since we were there. And so it completely messed up our program. So what we ended up doing is we had to put his 2 heat pumps in outside, and then which controlled us inside, but we had to take the outlet or the wire that was going to his new stove, and we had to split that wire through a circuit sharing device called a simple switch. So basically the way that works is it's got power to his stove. Anytime he's not using his stove or he's not pulling a certain amount of current on his stove, it'll switch the power over to the heat pumps. So I'm a little worried about this because we just did that as a temporary solution until he could get the 200 amp panel. But there's something that's holding him up from getting the 2 amp panel. I can't remember what it was, if it's gas meter situation or whatever. But there may be one more gas load, and I can't remember exactly what the deal was on that. But looking at this in the background, if we would have jumped in the time machine, if he would have pre-planned before the existing system failed, without causing additional wiring and infrastructure that would be removed onto the new panel. So he spent $3,000 for us to do all this extra electrical work that once he gets his new panel installed, all that's going to get undone and all these things are going to get ran to that new panel. So it needs to be done making some sense. And how cool is this little heat pump right here? Right, this is a 220 volt heat pump water heater. He was very concerned with the recovery time because he's got 3 kids. But this is a slim duct air handler mounted horizontally or vertically. Even has the super high efficiency MERV 13 filtration, 18-inch return air duct. All the duct work is right here. This was for half of his house. Super sweet little system here, and very small. So this contractor, he had a bid to put 1 heat pump in this house. This house was in 3 very different climate zones. Like downstairs was part subterranean, and there's a bedroom, office space, bathroom, and a little storage area down there. That's what this system was going for. And the upstairs, he had a quote to do 1 heat pump. So what would have happened is, if he wanted to cool the upstairs off, he would have had to freeze the downstairs. And if he wanted to warm the downstairs up, he would have had to heat up the upstairs like crazy. So 2 very small systems were the solution for that project. All right, this is the Vacaville guy. This is my house, actually, when I got my induction range installed. I was very proud. I did my own 6 cups of water in 92 seconds video. Anyway, so I was all gas. Actually, even worse, I moved into my house in 1997. It came with an electric range, and it had an electric dryer, and I ripped all that out and put gas stuff in because I was because I'm an HVAC guy. I'm gas, right? And so I ran all this gas stuff, had all this gas stuff going everywhere. So then when I started getting interested in heat pumps, I said, I'm going to replace everything 1 piece at a time. So I did home performance on my house like 10 years prior, but my air conditioning heating system was still only 4 or 5 years old. So I kept it in there. It was miserable living with that thing because I made my house super tight and super efficient, and I still had too big of a heating and air conditioning system in there. But it'll be 3 years this next September. So just over 2 years ago, I put the heat pump in. So I put the heat pump in, and I collected data for a year. I was going to replace it a year before, but I put in a monitoring system, and I wanted to collect data. And I think I ended up doing it for about 18 months on what my air conditioner was using and everything was using. So I put my heat pump in, and not only did my heat pump save 50% on energy cost over my existing air conditioning that I had to have set at 79 because it was so brutally cold when it came on. It was uncomfortable living in my house. But the unit used half as much energy. So as I staged all my electrification measures in my house, I was watching what it was doing with my gas bill. So I ran it 3 or 4 months each time to see what my gas bill was. Oh, we're getting close to time. So I put in my heat 120 volt heat pump water heater because at the time I put a second heat pump in my garage and I had put in the induction range. So I knew 110 was going to be for me. I put a 65 gallon there. It's been flawless. The latest project was I replaced my Zinsco 100 amp panel with a new 125 amp panel, and I use a span panel as my secondary panel. And so now I can put a car charger on there, and it'll use the span drive, so it'll automatically charge my car that I haven't bought yet. Not sure which one I will. It'll automatically charge my car when my power load is low. And then now I'm using more energy than my solar is providing, but I should have bought a larger solar system if I would have looked back on that, because all the measures. I actually got my solar installed back in 2011, and then I updated it in 2015. Now that I've gone to all electric and I have a battery, I'm probably going to have, I don't know, $1,200 to $1,400 true up bill this year. So a larger solar system would have been better. And I could have avoided some other costs at that time. So hey, that's the way it goes. And when you're an electrification guy, one thing interesting I did find out, I had a lot of stuff, but I had a tankless water heater in there. I have myself, my wife, and my son. I had a recirculation pump on that thing, so we'd push a button so I wouldn't have to wait for hot water, because I was tired of turning on the faucet and turning it off and have that thing turn on. But we were actually using $60 a month when gas prices were high this last winter, before I put in the heat pump water heater, $60 a month to heat water and dry clothes. And so when I got rid of that was the other part. When I got rid of the tankless water heater, my gas bill was only $11 at the highest ever. And that was like just running my dryer during the high months of gas. So I found out it costs $60 a month on the craziest months to just heat water in my house. So my 110 volt water heater is doing much better than that. That's what we got for you this week. Hopefully you guys will join us in 2 weeks for the next one, which we'll get a little bit deeper into the details on all this panel stuff. Hope y'all learned something, and thank you for that.